hey there. Ever get this feeling, right? Like, for all the talk about angels out there, we're seeing a lot more of, the other side of things these days, the not so angelic side.
Yeah.
It's like kind of spooky if you think about it too much.
Yeah.
And it got me thinking,
Right.
if angels are supposed to be more powerful, more like numerous, then,
Yeah.
why does it seem like the other guys are running the show?
It's a question people have been asking for a long time.
Seriously. So in this deep dive, we are going to unpack that very question.
Okay.
We're going deep on this one.
I like it.
And to help us make sense of it all, we're tapping into Jeremiah Adegbola's Rhythms of Grace podcast message. Have you heard that one?
I have. Yeah, he had some really interesting points in that message.
He did. He lays out these 7 reasons, right, for why demonic activity might seem so much more, active.
Yeah, more present.
Even though technically the angels have him outnumbered.
It's a fascinating perspective. And I think his emphasis on the idea of demonic activity seeming more prevalent is key.
Ooh, good point.
It's not that angels aren't present or active, but rather why their presence might not be as obvious as we might expect.
Okay, so it's like we're tuned into the wrong frequency or something?
Maybe.
And speaking of frequencies, his first 2 reasons are super interesting, and they're connected in a way that really made me think. He starts by talking about the importance of having an altar.
Right, and he's not saying to go build some big stone thing in your living room.
No, definitely not.
It's more about the concept of an altar, like a place of dedicated worship and connection with God.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
He's illustrating the importance of cultivating that kind of sacred space in our lives.
I like that.
He connects it back to Jacob's encounter with angels at Bethel, which essentially became his altar, a place of prayer and communion with God.
So it's less about the physical structure and more about cultivating that inner posture of seeking God, right?
Yeah.
Creating a space in our hearts and minds where the divine can actually reach us.
Exactly. It's about intentionally creating a spiritual atmosphere that's conducive to experiencing the presence of God, which Adegbola argues is essential for experiencing the ministry of angels.
Which brings us to a second reason. No light words. And before you think we've suddenly gone all New Age on you, this one's deeply rooted in Scripture.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Like, seriously deep.
Adegbola quotes both Isaiah 55.11 and Psalm 119.130 to highlight the power of God's words. His argument is that angels, as messengers of God, are naturally drawn to and empowered by those words.
Okay, so if we're constantly, drowning ourselves in negativity or even just, focusing on things that are just not in line with God, are we kind of
blocking it out?
Yeah, are we blocking out that angelic presence without even realizing it?
It's a fascinating question, isn't it?
It really is.
Think about it this way. If God's words carry his light and life, then our words, to the extent that they align with his, become an extension of that light, illuminating the spaces we inhabit.
So powerful.
Adegbol suggesting that this light-filled environment is naturally attractive to angels, who are, after all, beings of light themselves.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So it's not just about avoiding saying bad things. It's about actively filling our lives with words of life, truth, and encouragement. It's about aligning our words and therefore our thoughts and intentions with God's heart.
Yes, and this isn't about putting on some fake facade of positivity.
Well, no, for sure not.
But about grounding ourselves in God's truth and allowing that truth to shape the way we see ourselves, others, and the world around us.
It's about cultivating a spiritual environment, both internally and externally, that resonates with God's presence.
Yeah.
This idea of creating a receptive space for angelic ministry really struck me. And it gets even more interesting as Adegbola continues. His next 2 reasons, no joy and no goodwill, highlight the importance of our actions and how they might impact our experience of the angelic. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it speaks to the interconnectedness of things, wouldn't you say? Our inner state and our outward actions aren't these separate things. They're intricately woven together.
That makes sense. So how does this play out in terms of angelic ministry?
Well, Adegbola suggests that angels, dwelling in the joy of heaven, are naturally drawn to atmospheres of joy.
Okay.
He connects this to scriptures like 1 Thessalonians 5.16-19, where we're called to rejoice always, to pray constantly, and to give thanks in everything. He's suggesting that choosing joy, even amidst difficult circumstances, isn't just about putting on a happy face. It's about cultivating an inner posture of gratitude and hope that can actually shift the spiritual atmosphere around us, making it more conducive to angelic presence.
It's not about ignoring the very real struggles and suffering in the world or pretending everything is perfect.
Well,
It's about choosing to focus on the good, to find reasons to be grateful, even when life throws those curveballs our way.
precisely. It's that deep, abiding joy that transcends circumstances. And this joy becomes a beacon, drawing the angelic realm closer. It's like we're tuning our hearts to resonate with the frequency of heaven. And in doing so, we open ourselves up to experiencing a greater measure of God's presence and power in our lives.
Right.
And, this ties in beautifully with Adegbola's next reason, which is all about goodwill and kindness.
Right. No goodwill. It's like he's saying that our actions have this spiritual ripple effect.
Yeah.
Kindness creates these ripples that go way beyond what we can see. It reminds me of the story of Abraham welcoming those strangers into his home, and they turned out to be angels.
A classic example. And Adegbola points to scriptures like Galatians 6:9-10 and Hebrews 13:2 to further emphasize the point. Those verses talk about the importance of doing good and showing hospitality, even suggesting that we might be entertaining angels without realizing it.
Whoa. So if we're cultivating an attitude of joy and gratitude that naturally overflows into our interactions with others, creating this ripple effect of kindness and generosity,
Yes.
and this outward expression of goodwill in turn creates an even more inviting atmosphere for angelic activity. It's like we're actively participating in creating a world where God's love and grace are more tangible, more present.
It's true.
It's a beautiful cycle. Okay, so we've established an altar, we're speaking life-giving words, we're choosing joy even when it's tough, and we're extending kindness to everyone we meet. What's next on Adegbola's list of reasons why we might not be seeing angels as much as we could be?
Well, buckle up, because his next point is where things get really interesting. He talks about the significance of no sacrifice.
No sacrifice. Okay, that sounds a little intense. Like, it makes me think of those epic stories where people make huge sacrifices, for the greater good.
Right.
Is Adigbola saying we all need to, make some grand gesture to experience angelic help?
I don't think it's about these grand gestures necessarily. It's more about aligning ourselves with God's heart, even when it costs us something.
Okay, yeah.
He uses the story of Manoah and his wife encountering an angel in Judges 13:16-17.
Oh, yeah.
They offer a sacrifice, and the angel ascends with the flames. It's a pretty powerful image of how surrendering our will to God's will, offering our time, our talents, our resources to his service can create a spiritual opening for angelic activity.
So it's not about, giving up chocolate for a week or something. It's
Right.
about that deeper surrender, that willingness to put God's priorities above our own desires and comfort.
Exactly.
It sounds like Adegbola is saying that true sacrifice, it's a form of worship, an act of love and devotion that resonates with the spiritual realm.
Yes, and it's in those moments of surrender, of saying yes to God even when it's difficult, that we create space for his power to move in extraordinary ways.
I like that. So to recap so far, we're cultivating an altar in our lives, speaking life-giving words, choosing joy, showing goodwill, and making sacrifices that align us with God's will. Got it.
Mhm.
Now, this next one from Adegbola really piqued my curiosity. He talks about no light sounds. I gotta be honest, the connection between sound and angelic ministry isn't immediately obvious to me.
It's definitely an intriguing concept, isn't it?
Mhm.
Remember how we talked about words having power, how even our thoughts and intentions carry a kind of spiritual weight?
Right.
Adegbola builds on that idea, suggesting that all sounds, whether we're consciously aware of them or not, create a specific spiritual atmosphere.
Okay.
He contrasts these light sounds with what he calls harmful sounds, suggesting that the sounds we surround ourselves with can either invite or repel angelic presence.
Interesting. So it's not just about what comes out of our mouths, it's also what we're letting into our ears.
Yeah.
The music we choose, the shows we watch, even the general noise level of our environment.
That makes you think.
It really does.
Yeah.
Are we bombarding our senses with chaos and negativity, or are we creating a sonic landscape that's peaceful, harmonious, even spiritually aligned?
Precisely. And he actually uses the example of 2 Kings 3:15, where the prophet Elisha calls for a musician to play before he prophesies.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And the music seemed to create an atmosphere of receptivity, ushering in the presence and power of God so that the prophetic word could be released.
I never thought about it like that.
Adegbola seems to be suggesting that certain sounds, particularly those aligned with God's heart, might create a similar receptivity to the angelic realm. It's like we're tuning our spiritual antenna to pick up on those subtler frequencies of the divine.
So, if we want to experience more angelic activity in our lives, we might want to take inventory of our sonic environment.
Yeah.
What are we listening to? What are we allowing to influence our thoughts and emotions through our sense of hearing?
Important questions.
It's a fascinating concept, and it makes you think twice about that heavy metal playlist, doesn't it?
It certainly invites us to be more mindful, wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
And it's not about becoming, like, obsessively restrictive with what you listen to, but rather about cultivating a sense of awareness. What kind of atmosphere are we creating through the sounds we surround ourselves with? Are they life-giving, harmonious sounds? Or are they discordant, chaotic sounds that might be blocking out those subtler, more spiritual frequencies?
It makes you realize how interconnected everything is, how our physical environment, even down to the sounds we surround ourselves with, can impact our spiritual lives. It all ties back to that idea of creating a receptive space for God to work in and through us. Okay, ready to dive into Adegbola's final reason? This one feels like it ties everything together.
Absolutely. Let's hear it.
Okay, so Adegbola's final reason for why maybe we're not seeing all the angelic action we could be, he calls it being outside of God's will. And that one really landed for me. It feels like the big takeaway, you know?
Yeah, it's the heart of it all, isn't it? Adegbola is really emphasizing that angels, at their core, they're God's servants first.
Right.
They follow his plan, his purposes. So if we're off doing our own thing, chasing our own goals and ignoring what he's trying to tell us,
we're kind of tuning out, aren't we?
exactly. It's not that God's holding back his help or that angels are refusing to engage. It's more like our own choices are creating this disconnect.
Like trying to talk to someone who's got their headphones in, totally zoned out to their own world.
Perfect analogy.
You might be right there next to them, but are you really connecting?
Not really, no.
Exactly. And this isn't about trying to win God's favor or manipulate the spiritual realm to get what we want. It's about saying, okay, God, you're well above mine, trusting that his way is better even when it doesn't make sense to us.
That's it. It's that ongoing conversation with God, that heart posture of your will be done.
And then actually meaning it.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's about following through.
It's about being tuned in to his voice, sensitive to his nudges in every part of our lives. And the more we sync up with his will, the more we open ourselves up to experiencing all of him.
His presence, his power.
Exactly. Which, as Adegbola suggests, includes this incredible world of angelic ministry. It's a powerful reminder that we are not alone in this. We serve a God who knows our names, who cares about every little detail of our lives and wants to be a part of it all. He even gives us these amazing beings, angels, to be there with us.
To guide us, to protect us.
To help us walk the path he has for us.
Yes.
It makes you realize, the spiritual realm, it's not as far off as we sometimes make it seem.
It's closer than we think.
So just to recap, Adigbola's 7 reasons for why we might not be seeing all the angelic action we could be. No altar, no light words, no joy, no goodwill, no sacrifice, no light sounds, and finally, being outside of God's will. It's powerful stuff.
It is. What I appreciate about Adegbola's perspective is that it's not about checking things off a list. It's not about trying to earn brownie points with God.
Right.
It's about this invitation he's offering to live with this spiritual sensitivity, to be responsive to what God's doing, to create space in our lives for him to move in these amazing, powerful ways. And that includes the ministry of angels, absolutely. But it also includes all the other incredible ways he wants to work in and through us.
It's about tuning in to the spiritual realities all around us and making choices that line up with God's heart. What he wants, what he's doing.
Yes.
It's in those moments of surrender, of getting ourselves out of the way and saying yes to him. That's where the magic happens. That's where we open up to the fullness of what God has for us. And that, my friends, includes the reality of angelic ministry.
It's an amazing thing to consider. He's not saying, here's how you earn an angel visit, but he's highlighting the principles that govern this spiritual realm.
Right. It's about understanding that our choices have weight to them.
In this world and the next.
It makes you think, doesn't it? What if everyone started actually living this out? Building that altar in our hearts, speaking life with our words, choosing joy even when things are tough, being kind just because, making those sacrifices that put God first, being mindful of even the sounds all around us and always seeking his will above our own.
Wow.
Imagine how different our world could be.
How much more of God's presence and power we could be walking in every single day.
It's a question worth pondering, for sure.
It is an invitation, too.
Yeah.
Don't just think about it, but live it.
Huh.
See what happens when we truly sync our lives with the very heart of God.
This deep dive has been phenomenal. Seriously, I've got so much to think about, to process, to do differently.
Me too.
Thanks for coming on this journey with us. And remember, that spiritual realm we've been talking about, it's a lot closer than you might think.